Hi everyone, welcome to We the Curious. My name is Chris Dunford, I'm the Sustainability and Science Director here. It's a real pleasure to welcome you back. We've held Communicate in We the Curious several times before, but as some of you may know, we suffered a fire here in early 2022, and we only reopened this summer, so it's a genuine pleasure to have you all back in the room again. Our session today is on culture change. I'm sure many of you probably heard the expression that culture eats strategy for breakfast. In my experience, it's certainly true. My work here at We the Curious on environmental sustainability and culture change and across science centres in general, I know that if you get the culture right, then that's worth all the words you can put on paper for strategies and policies and procedures. So it's very beneficial and powerful. It's also notoriously hard to achieve and maintain. So it's that process of culture change in all its variety that we'll be talking about today. We have our panel here to help us do that. So we've got Gnisha Bevan from Nature Rising, Hannah Windross from Bristol Zoological Society, and Navroza Ladha from Natural England. But we also note that with Communicate, there's often a lot of experience and expertise in the room from you as well. So we'll also create a bit of time for you to talk to each other and talk to the panel about culture change as well. So the way we'll do that is I'll stop speaking very shortly and then we'll hand across to each of our three panelists. They'll each give you a provocation, some thoughts on culture change. We'll do those 1, 2, 3 as one group, and then we'll hand across to you for discussions in your groups, both in the room and online. And then we'd like you to come back to us with thoughts from your groups or from your own experiences, or indeed questions or reflections on the panel's provocations. Finally, we'll ask the panel to do some final reflections, and then we'll wrap up. And we'll pull all that off in 45 minutes. That's the plan. Okay, so that's enough from me. I'll hand straight over to Gnisha, who's got our first provocation. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it does work. I was thinking, I don't know how to operate this microphone. Great to see you, everyone. My name is Gnisha Bevan, and I co-lead the Black Seeds Network that I set up with Roger Griffith, MBE. We're a support network for, I'm going to use the term global majority environmentalists. And we have 3 priorities. So they are recognition, resources, and leadership. And maybe in our discussions a bit later, we could explore a bit more around why we've chosen those. We do lots of stuff, including tackling inequality in the mainstream environmental sector, but we also support the global majority people that we work with. I've got a 30-second introduction, so I can't go on too long about what I have to say. And very shortly, we're going to play a film which has been made by 5 young people and also a young person who was acting as a mentor. So I have to read out their names. That's Elle, Hemlata, Rudy, Will, Thomasin, and Kian, and you'll get more of an introduction to that project on the film itself. That will hopefully introduce you to some of the things that we talk about all the time with both Black Seeds Network and then a new program that we've set up called Nature Rising. And Nature Rising is a first of its kind program led by global majority people working with a partner, Friends of the Earth, who came on a journey with us and did absolutely incredible allyship. We've kind of created a new model, and the film that we're going to show in a moment is based on the young people interviewing people from that day. So hopefully we can roll the film. Filmmakers Michelle Pascal and Tracy Miller, along with Jordan Wilde, took 5 young people passionate about storytelling and our climate to the BBC. They got an inside peek of the Natural History Unit and some filming hints and tips. With that knowledge, they ventured out into a Nature Rising community event. Their task was to interview people living in urban areas and find out what they think about climate, nature and the environment. And here's what they found out.
That we've been divorced from our lands, from Africa, from the Caribbean, and from Asia. We're very much here. So when we go into spaces like the Mendips or these vast urban spaces, we're seen as strangers.
A lot of brown and black and people of colour folks don't feel like nature and green spaces are for them. We feel like environmentalism and all of this stuff around climate and nature is not for us, even though we are the global majority.
There's not one piece, Barney, what bit of green is there by the park? What is that? Then you go to another block of flats, it's the same again. We need land space in our communities where you can see things being grown.
It's really difficult to kind of fight against a system that's giving you all of the things all of the time, which seems like a great thing, but then you miss this kind of, wonderful thing about not having everything all the time and enjoying it when it arrives and it's June and there's strawberries and it's amazing,
I'm really into cooking, and I think that comes from sort of my grandparents and my mum, them bringing a sort of love of food and always involving us in the kitchen. And now for me, I can grow stuff in the garden. I can tell that it's like kind of a better quality than what you can get in the supermarket. It's like a special thing. I can enjoy it.
So I think looking to other countries that have different systems and maybe aren't relying on pesticides so much is also a really interesting thing to do. So kind of looking out to the global community as well.
Who knows more about plants than the people who have been using them for years for medicinal purposes in Asia, that the pharmaceutical companies have now extracted and are making billions from that. Yeah, the indigenous people in those lands have been using them for centuries. So it's harnessing that knowledge, it's making the world a fairer place and better for social justice.
I have the pleasure of living in St Paul's. What am I? Plantivist, activist, greenivist, ecovist. I also do my own stuff. I call myself Flourishing in St Paul's. So I do a bit of green stuff or gangster gardening in St Paul's.
The whole thing about Nature Rising is that it's global majority led. So it's led by global majority people. We're building projects, programs that meet our needs. And so I guess if it's about green space, then we need to think about how do people interact with that space.
And that's what this event's brilliant about, by the way, because it helps you question it. It helps you look at the challenge of sustainability from many different perspectives. And there are some amazing global majority leaders in there that I've been so thrilled. I'm tingly thinking about all the things I've learned today. So
our job at Creative Connects really is to showcase and to amplify community voices. That's what we're here to do. So the project that you're upon, Nature Rising, our work with elders, our work within schools, talking about the Windross generation, our work connecting businesses and organisations on the Bristol bus boycott. That's all part of telling story, telling narrative. This is a vital part, and it's also what's missing.
Nature is quite resilient. So even if you have a small space, and even in your room or back at home, and if your garden's small, I feel like you could make a lot with such a small space, and then sharing it with other people. So whatever you grow, share it with your friends, and they might be inspired as well. And then that's how you have a wider range of connection through nature.
It's changed my life. I started that journey into going back into being one with nature, and since I've been to this kind of network and community, I've been able to plant my own pollinators, which are doing really well. I've been able to go back into planting and just having fun in my garden, something that I've always wanted to do, to have that connection with my garden.
As much as we've loved doing Nature Rising on this kind of budget, it hasn't been sustainable like this. And we won't be running it again like this. So in order for the sustainability of projects or programs like ours, we really need to make sure that we've got that kind of flexible, sustainable funding, and that trust and relationship is there, and we can work with funders and really do something amazing, as we've done this time.
I'd like to see more of it. That's why I was happy to volunteer my time and be here today. And wait for the most exciting part of the day, where there'll be dancing and music and food.
So I hope you enjoyed that. It's my first time being on a stage, seeing my own face behind me. That's quite a surreal experience. And this is kind of, in some ways, really great that it follows this session that we've just had, which on kind of decolonial practice. But I've got a few questions as a kind of provocation. Are there things in this video that you haven't seen before? And if there were, what conditions do you think have led up to that point? What has made it so? Why haven't you seen things like this before? Because we know that global majority people in Bristol are doing loads of incredible work. So what's going on? And it's going to take all of us. So there's lots of space of people asking me and other people in Black Seas Network, but it's over to you, again, in a similar way to maybe if you're in the previous session. So have you seen anything you haven't seen before? And if there are things here that are new to you, why do you think that is? And then the third question is, what could you do about this? And if you are doing something already, how could you share that good practice? And maybe as you're discussing, can you share that good practice now with your colleagues? Thank you.
Thank you, Gnisha. Thank you. Hannah, we'll move straight across to you, if that's okay.
It is working. So we were asked, thank you so much, Gnisha. We were asked to prepare 3 different provocations to just stimulate thoughts, and they're all fairly different. They're all on the subject of culture change, and I was told to come to this podium, so I have come to this podium to do mine. So yeah, thank you. It builds very much on what Gnisha said, is that she's using levers to drive culture change. So I'll just talk a little bit about my experience with culture change. I'll try and keep it brief so we can claw back some time. My name's Hannah. I work at Bristol Zoological Society. I'm one of the directors there. That's probably all you need to know about me. So, in a nutshell, I believe culture change is incredibly difficult and it takes time. My experiences of it have been long and they have often failed. To change the culture of a sector, you'd have to change the culture in the majority of organisations in that culture. I've only seen culture changes really big when I've seen them in a whole sector due to outside influences. So if you think about a sector that you know that's really, truly changed, say, for example, newspapers. Newspapers, back in, I'm probably older than a lot of the people here, back in the early day were Fleet Street. They were guys smoking, having lunch, spending time on a story, investigative, many days, printed, and then technology changed. And the printing presses died, and the speed of journalism died, and they had to move really fast. Investigative journalism changed, and it's a very different model. Or if you were to take the travel industry, massive change, a total culture change. So when I can think of really big changes in a sector, it's often been because something outside has come in, whether it's technology, the law, to really force a change. To create change in a sectors without an outside imperative, so if we don't have a big outside imperative, we'd all have to change the culture in our organisations. And that means every single person in this room would have to look inwards and go back and change the culture from their own place. Now, I've done culture changes in organisations, and to start with yourself, there's always the sort of same metrics you look at, right? When you're trying to change a culture, you can change the people you employ. You can change what you measure. If you measure something, you tend to get it. So you can change the communication, you can do education, you can do recognition, you can change the structures, you can change your policies, you can change your leadership behaviours. Right? These are the sort of levers that you've got. In my experience, to drive an efficient behaviour change, you have to do all of those at the same time for a sustained period, ideally no less than 5 years, and you would do them around a single thing, right? So you'd say the behaviour we want is more inclusive and we work only at that for 5 years. We don't do anything else. We're not going to make our organisation more sustainable environmentally. Nope. We're not going to be better at fundraising. Nope. We're going to pick one thing. Now, in the environment sector, and I haven't always worked in the environment sector, the thing that I have found since joining the sector, being the charitable sector, is there's not a lot of money and there's not a lot of capacity because we're all stretched, right? So many people do this out of the love. So you have to focus. If you want to do a culture change and you want to put all those levers behind something and actually make it work, we can probably only afford to pick one thing. And then you've got to go at it for 5 years. And by year 2, you're bored. By year 3, you're really bored, and you still have to do it. That's the way you would affect change. Now, the final provocation I have is for leaders, that means saying no. So in my organisation, I have an organisation that would like to become more environmentally friendly, more inclusive, have a better fundraising culture, and be more collaborative. Which one do I pick? Because realistically, if I try and do all 4, I think I'm going to fail. And if we wanted to change the culture, everybody would have to do the same process. That's what I think. That's the provocation to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. That was a really interesting provocation. So if we move across finally to Navroza for our last provocation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move across over here. So hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Navroza Ladha. I run the legal governance and external affairs teams at Natural England. And for those of you who don't know, Natural England is the government's conservation advisor and regulator. And we have a really broad statutory purpose in our founding legislation, which is to conserve, enhance, and manage the natural environment for the benefit of current and future generations. So it's pretty broad, and then we've got lots of legislation that sits underneath that. We're one of the largest employers in the sector. We're a public body. You know, we serve our communities. And this piece around culture and nature and this importance of diversity of thought within our organisation and with the culture within the sector is something we've been thinking about for some time. We've got a board inclusion champion, Claire Fitzsimmons, and I want to quote what she said. She puts it beautifully as to the why. We all know the why. I don't think we need to necessarily go there again, but the way she says it is this. One of the fundamental beliefs in ecology is that diverse ecosystems are more resilient. They're better able to adapt to change, and they are more successful overall. And I think this has to hold true for societies, because monocultures collapse. Diversity of thought, perspective, experience, they're needed to address the challenges we're facing today. And the challenges we're facing today, whether organisationally or whether as a sector or whether actually in society more general, they're pretty hard and they're pretty complex. And so we've taken a hard look at ourselves organisationally. What does this mean? We're not currently representing the communities we serve at executive level. We're not at board level. We've done a lot in the last 5 years or so in terms of having dedicated EDI teams. Our refreshed EDI action plan talks about how we're going to be better at the governance, at the evaluation, at the evidence, at the collaboration. And we've got within our area teams, we now have dedicated inclusion advisors. So they're on the ground as part of that Connecting People with Nature programme. We're doing all of that. We're progressing a little bit, and I was struck by what Hannah was saying is that really ruthless? Are we focusing on far too much to get the kind of change that we want to see? What I do agree with is that if there is no silver bullet, it will take time. And for our organisation to be doing well, it needs sustained effort. And hopefully there will be that ripple effect in the sector, but more broadly. But I think we've got a long way to go. But my provocation actually has got nothing to do with that, because I thought I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. And it's this. So on December the 16th of this year, we're going to celebrate 75 years of a really possibly the most iconic nature bit of legislation called the National Parks and Access to the Countryside Act 1949. And my background is as a lawyer, and I'm really interested in that, how can the law really signal change? Hannah spoke about external events that can really signal culture change. And if you think about going into public spaces now and not being able to smoke, nobody bats an eyelid at that now. If you think about same-sex couples being able to enter into not just civil partnerships, but into marriage, all of those things had a profound cultural and societal effect. And so did this legislation to some extent. It was the legislation that founded a lot of the functions that we have today. And whilst it was going through, the planning minister at the time, and this is why I wanted to pick this bit out, is he said, this is not just a bill, this is a people's charter. So in 1949, legislatures were thinking of that really important connection between people and access to nature. A lot has happened since then. A lot of really great stuff has happened since then. So since that bit of legislation and other bits of laws that have built on it, we now have 10 national parks in England. We have around 90 million people visiting those national parks within the UK. We have 34 national landscapes, as well as 16 national trails in England and Wales. And the King Charles III England Coastal Path, when it's finished, will be the longest stretch in the world. We've got 221 national nature reserves, and we've got over 4,000 sites of special scientific interest. So a lot has happened in that 75 years. And also in that time, our understanding of the benefits of connecting with nature for physical, mental well-being, that has got much better as well. But that seed was in the 1949 legislation. However, the evidence shows us that we still have disparities, we still have inequalities. Certain groups from certain backgrounds still don't have that access on their doorstep where it's blue or green spaces. The change probably still isn't at the pace that we would like it to be. We saw on the video earlier, there are still people who don't feel that they belong, they don't have the connection. So my provocation actually is this. The law can do some really important signalling. Has it done enough? And is it now therefore down to that strong leadership, collaboration, that ruthless focus to really get the kind of cultural change we want to see? Or actually, is there still more scope for the law to signal more? And by the way, I don't have a view on that. I'm being completely impartial. But that's the provocation. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So you've had the three provocations. What we'd like to encourage you to do now is have discussions in groups. So if you're here in person in the room, I would encourage you to kind of meet on your tables. If you're in the kind of road seating towards the back, then perhaps join a table, or there's about the right number of people in each block of seating to turn around and have that discussion there. And if you're online, you'll be placed into a discussion room. So within your discussion rooms, again, on the topic of culture change, please reflect on the provocations, on the ideas and challenges within them. What thoughts did they create for you? What questions did they create for you? Were there things missing from them that you also think are important for culture change? And then we'll have time to hear back from some, probably not all the tables, afterwards. We'll put you into those groups now, and we'll put you in them for about 5 minutes, and we'll give you a 1-minute warning as well. Thank you. Okay, everyone. So if you could wrap up your discussions now, whether you're in the room or whether you're someone joining us online. So if you just bring your conversations to a close and focus attention back on the stage, then what we have time to do is to hear back from some of the groups, maybe not all of the groups. That does mean we probably need one person from each group rather than lots of people from each group. So we have a roving mic in the room, and very shortly we'll have some questions from online as well, which is great. So would anyone in the room like to start with a reflection, a suggestion, a question related to the provocations that you heard and what they mean for culture change? If we start within the room, and then we'll go to online next. If someone has a thought. It could be something from the table in discussion, or something in general from your own organisation, or challenges you've experienced around culture change. Oh, there is one. Great. The microphone's coming to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we picked up on the provocation of only one thing and doing it for 5 years as being a sort of an approach to take for culture change. And I'm sorry to say we unanimously disagree with you, partly because of the scale of what needs to happen in terms of culture change. And therefore, how do you prioritise and only pick one thing, but also about the positivity, about intersectionality, how you can, by doing one thing, you can affect multiple things through doing that in a sort of, if you take a purposeful approach to it, you can have multiple impacts through doing, sort of single approaches. So I would encourage all of us to think grander, but I agree to some degree that you've got to be really focused on making it work.
I think it's really okay to totally disagree as well. You don't have to caveat that at the end. I'm glad it provoked a really good conversation.
The sign of a good provocation, in fact. Yeah. Do we have any questions online yet? Not yet. Someone else from the room? Please, over here.
Hi, yeah, we were talking about with legislation that's something that could be very wide-reaching if it was put into legislation would be incorporating appreciation and a relationship with nature, experience of nature in the curriculum from a very early age. So, recently there's been really great sort of progress in terms of looking at nature, appreciating nature or contact with nature, GCSEs, but that's already quite late on, and you have to make a choice to do that. Whereas if that was built into the curriculum in the same way as, for example, 5 a day is, nutritional, sort of aspects of being in our society and growing up, then it would reach everyone. It would reach wider. It would reach all cultures. It would be across the board. And we thought that could be a good idea.
Any reflections now? Because yours is more the legal provocation, which I think this sits with.
Yeah, no. And this was the point. This was the point to say, actually, what else could we potentially be doing that could help drive the change we want to see? So I'm not going to comment on whether, whether we can take that away and we can make that deliverable. But those are the kind of ideas that I think we genuinely should be looking for and at.
Any comments from online?
Not yet.
Okay, that's fine. Any other thoughts from the room? There's one over here, actually, in the middle.
Thank you. It was just to add to the legislation, but we discussed it on our table, and highlighting some of the successes of smaller changes that have happened. So, like the plastic bag tax has now reduced plastic bags showing up on our beaches by 80%. And there's other ones that have come into place this year, like reducing using microplastics in wet wipes. So keeping those small ones coming in that are going to make change but not be shouted about as much. And then we can do the bigger ones like right to roam and some other things as well. But just that keeping an eye on those small legislation changes because they'll have a great impact in the overall.
Thank you. And do you feel as it was the legislation that was the main driver around those plastic reductions, do you think?
I would say so, yeah. I think that people were aware of it, but when their hand is forced, they can make those changes. And if there are alternatives in place, they're very minimal changes to actually do, and you integrate them quite easily. But as long as we're giving options for them as an alternative as well, then it can be done by legislation and they have to do it.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the room or online? Oh, one at the back there.
We looked at kind of each theme in turn and kind of came to the conclusion that the first set was around kind of individual and kind of community action. The second set was around kind of organisational change, and the third was kind of the kind of legal framework. And we kind of weighed out which one was kind of more important if we had to pick one. And I think we came to the conclusion that you need all three, and they move at different speeds. So we can all take action individually tomorrow. Culture in organisations take longer, and the legal framework takes kind of even longer. But change can come from both ends. So change can come bottom up, and we can take action, and that puts pressure on organisations and policymakers. But equally, I mean, the great example we had in the room was we probably all wouldn't have volunteered a smoking ban, but actually it needed top-down change to then make it normal and make it part of our everyday life. So I think where we got to was actually maybe there's no silver bullet, no answer. Maybe you need change at all levels, and maybe it might feel chaotic, but you need all of that to happen at once. And through that kind of chaotic change at all levels, you're going to get change that adds up.
Thank you. I like the idea as well that this idea of moving from individual to organisational to kind of legal sector was the way we planned it. I think I'll take that as a deliberate thing we did. Any reflections on that from the panel as a thought? That idea of the all three scales, but needing all of them at different paces.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it's really important. We definitely need to connect grassroots level. What's happening at grassroots level with what's kind of happening in the middle with national and high-level decision-making. I think to sort of throw another provocation out there, that may feel like it's at grassroots level, it may feel community-based or individual-based, but what kind of decisions, policies, initiatives, legislation will we pass if that diversity isn't reflected in those spaces as well? And then with that, when we're talking about culture change, comes different ways of thinking and different ways of being and interacting, different types of knowledge, different things are prioritized. So what then happens in a high-level decision-making space to make that work really, really well? And I don't think we're there yet. So what could be done instead?
Thank you. We should probably move on time-wise, but I do want to check if there's any questions online. Maybe to take one from online?
There are a couple. Would you like me to read both and you could choose one, or?
Read both and we'll see if we can find any connection between the two. That'll be the challenge.
Okay. From Victoria, how helpful do you think it is to harness national pride, i.e. X, Y and Z countries are doing this, let's not look bad by lagging behind? And then from Helen, change can take so long to become common practice. Is there a concern that a modern society that has become used to having information, entertainment and technology instantly will see that as too long to attain and won't bother? How do we change that unwillingness to look ahead?
Okay, so two quite different ideas there. So what I'll do is, if anybody wants to come back on either one of them, just very briefly, a reflection on those two. Hannah?
I'll just come back on the first one. So the national pride thing, I think absolutely. I think it's an amazing thing to utilise. We run many conservation projects around the world, and one of which we run in the Philippines, and we are specifically working there to stop illegal hunting and to support reforestation in certain areas. And the community engagement program that we're developing collaboratively with groups out there is about harnessing national pride. So it's about actually having pride in your landscape, your nature, your wildlife, your biodiversity, and championing it. And we've seen that in places like Costa Rica, and we can see it working really well. I would love to think about what that national pride might look like for the UK. I think probably Wild Isles is the start of that, and I think it can absolutely be used as a way of bringing people together. So the answer to that is yes. I think for wildlife, it's a brilliant focus.
Can I respond to that by saying, what is your national pride? What does that look like? Who's in that picture? And what kind of, what does it, if you took a photo of national pride, who would be in it? And I think it's wonderful having the idea of a kind of national conservation-based program, but who does that reflect? And you might reach the same people that you normally reach, but how will we reach other people that very recently were made to feel very uncomfortable in their own country or their country where they're living now? So there are other things that we also need to consider with that. I don't think it's as simple as, oh, we'll have a national campaign and then that's it.
I think that's really good, and I think how loaded the word national is, I don't even realise it, and then when you bring that to my attention, that's really helpful, because you want to have pride in nature, but you have to have, like you say, something inclusive, and I think I probably need to reflect on the use of the word national and the way I used it then.
Thank you. So we need to bring to a close now, so I was going to suggest maybe a 30 seconds final thoughts from the panel, and then we'll close, maybe starting that down that end there.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to come back to this phrase of storytelling and how important inclusive storytelling is, and even coming back to the change is going to take too long, people want things instantaneously. actually the story is a really powerful one here. You know, there's a climate change, there's a nature crisis. Literally, future generations are at risk if we don't get this right, and we all have to play a part in that. So how we tell that story in a really meaningful way, in a way that involves everybody, I think will continue to be really important.
I'm just going to close, I guess, on resilience. I guess the idea, I really love the idea of change at different levels and doing it at the same time. And it's a long journey, and we can do our individual things, the organisational things. And I just think working on a way that we can maintain our energy and motivation and be resilient and keep going when the change can take a while is really important.
It's a bit hard to comment. Nobody mentioned global majority people. And I think I'll leave it there.
And just a final thought for me as we close, which is that obviously organisations, sectors, they're all essentially collections of human beings associated, working together in certain ways. And so for me, it's a similar message that I've heard it communicate for years now, which is within your organisations, you need your ecologists and your climate scientists and your communication experts, but we also need to talk to the psychologists and the sociologists, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to change people and behaviour, and that's where the big challenge often lies. We'll close now, because I think the other rooms are about to come into this room. So thank you. The panellists are probably around for a bit longer. If you want to speak to us during the break, we'd be glad to do so. And thank you for coming to this session. Enjoy the rest of your day.